Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about legislators and lawmaking. So I think it helps first to define what a legislator is. A legislator defined would be the body of a country or state that has the power to make laws. So on the national level, we're talking about the United States Congress. But at state level, we're talking about the Illinois General Assembly. The U.S. Constitution divides up the power to make laws between the federal or national government and state governments. This is a concept known as federalism, which we had talked about when discussing our constitutional framework. So let's talk first and foremost about the composition of Congress, the makeup of Congress. What does Congress actually look like? Well, Congress is what's known as a bicameral legislature. Bi meaning two. Think bicycle, two wheels, bisexual, whenever you see bi, it means two. Cameral meaning chamber, so two chamber legislator. And we have our Congress, which is our national legislature, and then you have the House of Representatives as one chamber. You have the Senate as the other chamber. For a bill to become law, it must pass both houses. It can't just pass the House or just pass the Senate. It has to pass both chambers of Congress. Then the main job of Congress is to make laws. Sometimes students come into this class thinking that the president makes law. The president's main job is not to make law. Who makes law? Congress makes law. They are the legislators. They are the law-making body of this country. The legislative branch writes legislation. So let's talk about what each one of those chambers looks like. So our House of Representatives has 435 members. These 435 representatives, this number is set in stone. It's not going to change unless, of course, there's an amendment to the Constitution. But I don't foresee that happening anytime in the near future. So 435, even if a territory such as Puerto Rico one day becomes a state, this number is not going to go up. This number is going to stay the same, but the 435 members is going to be reallocated amongst the now 51 states of the U.S. And that's because the 435 representatives in the House of Representatives is based on proportional representation. What this phrase means is that each state is represented in the House according to the size of the population, not the size of the state. You have a state like, let's take Illinois. Illinois right now currently has 18 House representatives. If our population is found to have decreased over the past decade, we are going to get fewer House representatives in the next decade. However, if our population were to have gone up over the past decade, then we would get more representatives in Congress over the next decade. So it's all based on proportional representation. California is a state that has the most people in it, is the most populous state in the nation. So therefore, California has many House representatives. But then you get a state like Wyoming. There's like 2 dudes and a cow that live in Wyoming. So they're going to get few House representatives. They only get 1 House representative. The Senate, on the other hand, is not based on proportional representation. The Senate has 100 members that are based on equal representation. Now, if you think about this term, equal representation, every state gets 2. We have 50 states in the nation, so therefore 50 times 2 equals 100. There's 100 members in the Senate. If Puerto Rico one day becomes a state, this number will change because each state is guaranteed equal representation. So therefore, Puerto Rico would get 2 senators in our U.S. Senate, bringing this number to 102. Laws passed by Congress, our national legislature, apply to every single state in the nation. Laws passed by a state legislature, on the other hand, only apply to that state. So if the Illinois General Assembly passes a state law, it's not going to apply to citizens in Ohio. It's only going to apply to Illinoisans. But if Congress passes a law, it applies to all 50 states. So I just want to show you a map of what our current Congress looks like. Here we have the House of Representatives. As I mentioned, there's 435 members in the House of Representatives. Currently, the House is controlled by the Democratic Party by a count of 235 Democrats to 199 Republicans. But if you look at this map, it is kind of misleading at first. There's a lot of red up here in this map. How can there be so much red, but yet the Republicans do not control the majority of the House? Well, you have to think of where all of this red is. You have states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. They don't have very large populations, and so therefore they don't get many House members. They don't get many House representatives. But then you have a state like California. It's hard to see here, but all of these tiny little districts have the same number of people in it than the entire state of North Dakota, the entire state of South Dakota, or Wyoming. Same thing with Illinois. Down over here, this is where we're at in the suburbs of Chicago. You have tiny, tiny little districts, geographically speaking, but we have the same amount of people living in these tiny little districts as the entire state of Wyoming. Over here, we have the Senate makeup. Currently, the Republicans control the Senate. Well, there's 100 members of the Senate, 2 per state. You have 53 Republicans in the Senate, and then you have 45 Democrats in the Senate. The Senate, red, all of these red states, by the way, red is the color that's associated with the Republican Party, that is Donald Trump's party. Blue is the color that is associated with the Democratic Party, that is Barack Obama's party. So if you look over here at this map, blue states are states in which the Democrats hold both seats in that state. Purple states have split party control, so 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. And then you have red states are states where Republicans hold both seats of the Senate. So a state like Texas, you have 2 senators, both are Republicans. A state like Nevada, 2 senators, both are Democrats. A state like Wisconsin, 2 senators, 1 is a Republican, 1 is a Democrat. So lawmaking. Congress passes laws that are known as statutes. That's kind of the formal name for a national law. Statutes tend to deal with issues of national importance, not really state by state importance or regional importance, but rather issues that pertain to the nation as a whole. So environmental quality, for example, this is a national issue. This is not just a one state issue. Our national defense, homeland security, labor relations, veteran affairs. These are national issues. State lawmakers, on the other hand, typically meet on an annual basis, and they create laws that deal with statewide impacts. Education, for example. In our last lecture, we had established that education is a state power. It is a state issue. So the Illinois General Assembly would create Illinois education law, or Illinois transportation laws, or traffic laws within the state. Marriage laws, criminal laws deal with the state of Illinois only. Let's jump to city governments now. Cities, towns, counties, they also have lawmaking bodies. You have county and city councils, for example. Those are lawmaking bodies. They're legislators. They create ordinances that have the force of law. Boards of aldermen, which I'm not really going to get into right now. Local boards of education. The school board at District U46, all of those members needed to be elected by the community. And they developed policy rules for this district, making them a local form of government. Local governments pass laws known as, not statutes, but ordinances, and they also pass regulations as well. And these ordinances have to deal with issues like land use, where, generally speaking, you have certain zones in cities are sectioned off for commercial activity, business, and then you have residential areas in cities. And that's why, generally speaking, you don't have within your own neighborhood a house that is right next to a McDonald's, which is next door to an apartment, which is next door to a Walmart, which is next door to... Because you have zoning laws that section off certain parts of the city for different types of activities. Parking ordinances. In certain cities, you can't park in the street overnight. I know that in Downers Grove, for example, you cannot park your car on the street between the hours of, I don't know, I think it was like 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. or maybe it was midnight and 6 a.m. But your car cannot be on the street during those hours. Local governments pass ordinances regarding schools, the regulation of local businesses. A city may pass an ordinance that deals with noise regulations. I know that one of my old students at Bartlett High School was concerned that there was a wedding venue that was opening up right behind their house, and this wedding venue was blasting music way into the night in violation of local noise ordinances. So they had complained, and sure enough, the government had contacted the wedding venue and told them, hey, after a certain time, you got to turn the music down. I always go to a local town fest in Downers Grove. It's called Downers Grove Fest. And it's always kind of strange, but the band stops playing immediately at midnight. And of course, you've been to a concert, you have the crowd that screams, encore, encore, and the bands never put on an encore because right at midnight, hey, it's the law. Music has to stop. And those are quiet hours from there on out. So the Supremacy Clause. Federal laws sometimes come in conflict with state and local laws. For example, in the 1960s, there were federal laws against racial segregation that conflicted with state laws requiring separate accommodations for African Americans and whites. On one hand, you have national law that prohibits segregation, but then you had southern states that had developed laws that ran contrary to what the federal law had stated. In that case, federal law always trumps state law. So to give you a modern example, federal marijuana laws today come into conflict with state marijuana laws. As you're aware, several states across the United States have now legalized the recreational use of marijuana. The issue is at the federal level, at the national level, our government has not legalized marijuana. It is still a Schedule I drug under the federal government. So you have state law that seems to contradict federal law. Which one wins out? Well, it's federal law. That's if the Drug Enforcement the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, if they were to ever enter into a Washington or a Colorado and start arresting marijuana business owners, they have the ability to do so. Their authority comes from the fact that federal law trumps state law. So this is why marijuana businesses in a Colorado or a Washington can't do business with credit cards yet. They can't even do business with banks. They conduct all of their business in cash, physical cash. The reason being is because banks don't want to do business with them just yet, because they know that if they do business with these marijuana businesses, then they're in violation of federal law. They are doing business with drug dealers, at least according to federal law. Both of these instances, the courts rule that state laws are invalid if they contradict federal law. And this is based on Article 6 of the Constitution. Article 6 of the Constitution is known as the Supremacy Clause, that the Constitution and the laws of the United States are the supreme law of the land, and they are superior, they trump any state laws. To give you the exact text of the Supremacy Clause, it reads, "The Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land." But this does not apply to laws about topics that are the proper focus of the states, such as we talked about, education. Last few things. Bills. Legislators will try to respond to the needs of citizens by introducing legislation in the form of a bill. Think of a bill as a baby law. It is a law that has not yet been passed by both of the chambers and signed by the president. Bills passed by the legislator and signed by the president become law at the federal level. So we're going to just go ahead and stop there for today. I think that's enough. Hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you next time.